Good morning. Wonderful to see such a big group of colleagues, students, very important group as well. And of course, Honorable Minister, Director General, very happy to see you here too. And thanks a million to Maya Simonetti and Nina Plevnik for organizing and inviting me to this wonderful event on the power of nature. So I can stand here and talk about all the bad things that are happening in our cities today. We have problems, as we heard from the minister, with climate change, global warming, heat waves during summer, serious floods, as we saw recently also in Valencia area. We have a lot of transitions, mobility transitions, energy transitions, a housing crisis, a public health crisis. But if I would start talking about this to start our conference off today, I think we'll all get very depressed. So the story I will bring you today is a story of hope, of positive energy, of bringing nature into cities to make everybody's life better. And I was very happy that we already heard about the 330-300 rule or principle, because I will talk a little bit more about it in my presentation as well. Sorry, the text here fell away, but I'm going to talk about nature positive, nature-based cities. How do we really make this happen? And I've had the pleasure to work and live in many different places in the world, in North America, in Europe, in Asia. Recently came back to a city that is trying to do it right, the city of Utrecht in the Netherlands. Some of you may know it. We sometimes call it the mini Amsterdam. It's a bit more quiet than Amsterdam. So if you ever come back to the Netherlands, come to Utrecht. It's a nice place to visit. So actually we're looking at, sorry, the text is very small, but we're looking at a new era for urban nature. We're looking at places like we see here. This is in Berlin, where cities take nature much more seriously. We see, for example, that people embrace nature for climate adaptation, for public health purposes. We also see a reconnection of communities with nature, for example, for our children and the way they grow up. So I will talk about that and also talk about some of the benefits, of course, that nature brings to us based on some of the latest research. And then, of course, action, right? How do we actually make nature-based cities work? In Europe, internationally, but also in a country like Slovenia, where of course you've had a long tradition of being pretty close to nature, but have also been urbanizing and have also faced some of the challenges that we heard the minister talk about earlier. So a new era for urban nature. And one of the cities where I've experienced this is on the picture here, is the city of Barcelona in Catalonia, Spain. So this is a city that was faced with a lot of pressures. Climate change, very warm days in summer, drought, tourism, and a housing crisis. But actually, one of the main problems Barcelona faced was air pollution from traffic. So people in Barcelona have been used to taking their car in front of their house, in front of the shop, till the politicians said, well, we have to really change this. We have to make the quality of the air better. And they started thinking about greening the city, like they did with Passeig Sant Joan, you can see here, which they turned from basically a big highway going into the center of the city into a linear park. And of course, they did much more. They did also the superblocks, which I will talk about later. And there's actually many, many stories today of cities that are taking the step to do a radical, I can use the word radical, greening, to try to push away space for the car, to try to push away space for paved surfaces, and to reclaim that space for nature, but also, of course, for us, maybe most important part of nature, which is us humans. We also need more space, more human space. And I think really where this also started to really happen was during the COVID pandemic. I was living at that stage partly in Vancouver, and I was just making a move at the height of the pandemic to Barcelona. And in Vancouver, British Columbia, the city authorities were really good in keeping the parks and green spaces open to people. So you could go to the park, to the beach, you had to keep your distance, and you see people were respecting it. While other Canadian cities like Montreal and Toronto, they closed off all parks, all green spaces. And it was the same when I came to Barcelona. It was even worse. We had to stay in our apartments for months. We were not allowed to go out unless you had an urgent shopping tour, or if you had a dog, because if you had a dog, you were allowed to walk your dog. And the rumor says that all the dogs in Barcelona lost a few kilograms of weight because all the neighbors were walking your dog. But of course, it was a pretty terrible time. Some people with small children, they were stuck in apartments of 40, 50 square meters. And of course, children had no way to go. The only bit of nature they still had was the tree they could see outside, or the little plants on the balcony. And first studies show that people that actually could see green during the COVID pandemic had much less problems with mental health, were much healthier during the pandemic. So even being able to see green, and it was really great that all of your hands went up basically when the question was, can you see 3 large trees or 3 trees? Because it is important for us to even see trees, to see green around us, for our health, for our performance, for our creativity. So this is in Dutch. I don't expect you to read it. I have a little translation there as well. But recently, a study was done that shows that about half of all the Dutch people with a garden or a balcony regularly finds it's too hot during the summer. So they feel they cannot be outside comfortably because temperatures in the Netherlands have gone over 40 degrees centigrade some days. And I was away from the Netherlands for about 25 years. I came back 2 years ago. And in summer, it feels different. It feels like I'm in Barcelona. It feels like I'm in the Mediterranean sometimes. The air is warmer, it's drier, it's much hotter. And I can see people are dealing with problems. Elderly people, pregnant women, people that have other health issues, for example, cardiovascular diseases, they have problems with heat. And we see that, for example, in the summer of 2022, in August, 500 people in the Netherlands died prematurely because of heat. You would say, okay, 500 people, but in 1 month? In 2003, in Europe, we had a big heat wave. Some of you may remember it. The estimates are that about 70,000 people died prematurely during that heat wave. Places like Paris, hundreds, if not thousands of people suffered really bad health and died because of the heat. So what do we do? Are we all going to move into air-conditioned houses and spaces like they do in places like Saudi Arabia? That will only make the climate crisis worse, of course. So we have to really be clever about greening, because it shows that if you can increase canopy cover sufficiently, you can cool the air down with 1 or 2 degrees, and that can be enough already for people to feel comfortable again. It doesn't have to be 5 or 10 degrees cooling. Even a few degrees already gives a big, big impact. So we see, of course, that cities are taking this seriously. From Barcelona to the city of Leuven in Belgium, we are doing greening, rain gardens, daylighting of rivers, tree planting. But of course, it's always really important to remember that these nice new projects are important, but maintaining the existing green, the existing trees, is even more important. I work a lot with cities across the world, and they ask me sometimes, Cecil, what is the #1 advice you can give us for greening? And I tell them, let your trees live a few years longer. The average urban tree doesn't get older than about 35 years in most of our cities. So if we can prolong the life of that tree, let it grow and thrive a bit longer, it can actually provide many more benefits over time. So it's much more efficient than keeping to plant new trees all the time, which is actually from a carbon perspective not so good at all, because actually that tree will take at least 30 years before it's carbon neutral. So something we don't really think about so much, but it is important. So it's really important to have politicians that understand, like your own minister, right, who has a background in landscape professions, in green, and understands the importance of this topic. So the mayor of Seoul, Mayor Lee, he was asked one day by his engineers and his planners, he says, Mayor Lee, we have this 2-story highway in the city. It's about 12 lanes, and the traffic still gets stuck. So let's add a 3rd level to the highway. And then the mayor did something which is very unusual. He said, no, you know what? We're going to take the highway out of the city, and we're going to bring back the river that used to be here, and we're going to create a river park. People thought he was crazy. But actually they did it, and this became one of the most iconic green spaces in Seoul, in Korea. The traffic didn't get worse. They managed to solve it in other ways. But the city got this really high quality green space, and Mayor Lee went on to become the president of Korea. He later, unfortunately, was kicked out and imprisoned because of some other issues. But at least this one thing he did really well. So we need brave politicians. We need politicians who can dare to make decisions like that. Like also in Utrecht. This looks wonderful, right? This is the Catharijnensingel, one of our canals that goes around the city of Utrecht. Just imagine this used to be a highway. It used to be a terrible highway that was completely disconnecting the city. Now it's a beautiful canal and river park, designed by Okra Landscape Architects. And then I already mentioned Barcelona. They have already had a plan for 30, 40 years to start making these super blocks, where they take 3x3 city blocks in the Eixample area and say, within those blocks, we're going to remove traffic as much as we can. We're going to create new green spaces. And this went on for a while, and then COVID came, and they started painting streets yellow, what they call tactical urbanism. And they started creating new parks that were basically on the streets. And then my street, the Carrer de Girona, looked like this at some stage. They took away the car habitat, and they created tree and people habitat. And it was actually really successful. First studies show that people start sleeping better. Their mental health is better. Children have more space to play. People are playing volleyball now on intersections of streets. But the initial reaction of many people, shop owners, local residents, was, we don't want this because it's bad for business. Of course, now after a few years, basically everybody says, wow, this is great. Actually, my business is booming because people are hanging around longer. They're spending more time shopping. So sometimes the no movement is strong, but we need to go on. We need to push, and we need to convince people actually to do this. Even in places like Singapore, of course, they've gotten this, and they now use greening as a big, big instrument, creating new green spaces like Gardens by the Bay. This is new land, and Dutch people, we know everything about creating new land, right? Because we needed to do that in our small little country. But Singapore did the same, and they didn't put houses on it, as you would expect they would do. They actually put a park on it, and a big hotel. Okay, one big hotel. But Gardens by the Bay now is one of the most popular tourist attractions in Singapore. And Singapore, in everything it does, in building, in designing, in tourism, economy, is actually integrating green and nature. That, of course, sets an example, even for a city like Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. We did a project here with Stefano Boeri Architecti when we looked at green roofs and green facades. And we found out that the tree canopy cover in Riyadh is less than 1%. Still, we have millions and millions of people living in environments where temperatures regularly get over 50 degrees centigrades. So what do people do? They spend their whole life in air conditioning. From their home, to the car, to the shopping mall, to the work, to the school, to the mosque. It's all air conditioning. Nobody's out on the streets. I remember I was walking there, it was March, doing some field work. The only people I saw walking around were immigrant workers, and then me. Everybody else was in air conditioning. But now they're actually increasing the tree canopy cover to 9%. They're creating 440 new parks. They're greening all the schools and all the mosques. And of course, this requires a lot of effort, a lot of money, which is not really a limiting factor in Saudi Arabia, but also a lot of water. And the water, it turns out, is possible because they only recycle, at the moment, 15% of the water. 85% of the water is not recycled. So by using the water more cleverly, by using native species, they can actually green the city step by step. And they're making some remarkable progress in that way. But of course, it is a little bit easier when you have a top-down government system, right? Where there's basically one person at the top deciding, which is quite different from countries like the Netherlands or Slovenia, where we have a lot of very complex democratic procedures, as the minister already said, right? Things can sometimes move a bit slow. And that can be frustrating, but of course it's also part of our society. So sorry, this text got a bit big, but what I wanted to say here is that a lot of people are thinking now about bringing plants and trees into our cities, also philosophically. A really nice author is Stefano Mancuso, an Italian writer and geographer, who talks about phytopolis. He says we have to bring plants into our cities much more significantly. And we have to live with trees and plants. We have to create streets that are basically linear forests. And we actually have to design our cities much more like plants. Not like animals where you have a head and legs and the functions are separated. Plants are much better in spreading the functionality, creating a much more resilient structure. So lots is happening, and you may know some of these initiatives. I won't mention all of them, but there's a lot of events, a lot of networks, a lot of branding programs. There is focus. Politicians, decision makers, businesses, they are really interested in greening, scientists. When I started doing my PhD in urban forestry in Finland in 1995, I could find, I think, 2 people in Europe that were studying something with urban forestry as a PhD student. Today, there are hundreds, if not thousands of students. Only in China, for example, there are many, many students that call themselves urban forestry students. So there's a lot happening. A lot of research, a lot of work on the benefits of green that can actually help us, right? Argue for why do we need trees and green? Well, of course, all these different aspects are important. The cooling effect, economy, biodiversity, education. This study I really like a lot. This is done by the Barcelona Institute of Global Health. They did a study in 93 European cities. They looked at tree canopy cover and they linked it to cooling effect as well as the number of people that you could save from dying early during a heat wave. And it turns out if you hit 30% canopy cover, you can save about 1/3 of the people who died too early because of heat. So if you think back, right, 70,000 people in Europe who died prematurely, we could have saved 20 to 30,000 lives if our cities would have been greener. I can tell you, this argument usually helps when you talk with politicians. And if it doesn't help, what I sometimes do is I bring the local mayor or the local deputy mayor out to 2 streets in their neighborhood, in their city. I first go to a street with a lot of trees. And we walk on a hot summer day and they feel it's very pleasant, they're very happy. Then we turn a corner and we go into a street where there's no trees. And it's hot, it's uncomfortable. And they start feeling that, oh yeah, it's really not a good place to be. So they feel the effect of trees. I think that is sometimes needed, right? That we actually have to feel ourselves what the impact can be. The same with people who have trees in their gardens. Sometimes they say, well, the tree is annoying, right? It takes away the view, it has these leaves that are falling. It's really not so nice. But then you try to let them know, right? How would it be without that tree? Would it be too hot, too sunny? What would you miss, right? You won't have birds singing anymore. You won't see the colors, you won't see the rustling of the leaves. So we really have to have a big job there as well with private tree owners. So urban trees, urban forests, they are important across the urban-rural interface, right? So from the city center, where it could be very hard sometimes to grow trees, to peri-urban areas, to also more remote areas, also in Slovenia, where of course urban values are really determining what happens with the landscape. So we link it to sustainable development goals, we link it to all the different benefits that nature can provide. And then of course we have this new fancy concept of nature-based solutions. And of course we've seen there's a lot of interest from businesses, from engineers, from architects, and there's a lot of fancy solutions, expensive green roofs, very interesting schemes. But when people ask me, what is the best nature-based solution for you? I say it's a tree, right? Because it doesn't have to be so high-tech or fancy. Actually, a tree does so many good things for us. Let's not forget about those, right? Let's not forget as we do all our fancy greening stuff in cities, which is also needed. But let's try to think about trees wherever we can. Let's try to create sponge cities, as Kang Yan-yu, an architect, landscape architect from Beijing, China, says. Let's make cities as green so that we can actually see them as creating sponge effects. So if there comes too much water, it will take it up and slowly release the water so we don't get flash floods, we don't get flooding the way we've seen. Greening our cities, and this concept of sponge cities is known all the way to the political top in China, all the way up to President Xi. Every Chinese politician knows what a sponge city is. So let's do a similar thing in Europe, right? To make sure that all our politicians in Europe know what a sponge city is and what it can do for us. There's a famous story of President Xi going to Beijing, meeting the mayor, looking at the parks in Beijing and says, these parks are boring. We need to change them into forests. So we're going to change from this kind of conventional lawn-based parks and we're going to create mini forests all over Beijing. And they did, right? Beijing starts to become calling itself a forest city. More trees also in parks can actually help cooling. And then of course we need to make the point, right? We have to argue, we have to show the benefits. And we have all kinds of tools now like iTree and other instruments that can actually show also in economic terms the benefits of trees and green spaces. The Central Park effect is a really interesting report from New York Central Park, where they did a very detailed study of the economic impact of just that one park, looking at things like economic activity, real estate prices, hotel value, and of course, the value of Central Park is immense. It's many, many, many millions of dollars every year. Still, there have been talks in the past about taking part of Central Park and maybe using it for new development. So no single piece of green space is sacred. At some stage in history, a politician, somebody will come and say, let's have a look at this, right? Do we need all of it? Can we maybe cut a little piece? Central Park so far, of course, is still safe, but we'll see what happens in the future. And this you can't really very well, but this is a study from California where actually they found that people who live in green environments spend $375, I think it is, less on healthcare each year compared to people who live in non-green environments. So if you think about California, many, many millions, right? Even if it's 20, 30 million people that would save that much money, there's a tremendous amount of money that could be saved if we would green our cities properly. But of course, that money doesn't come back to green space planning and management. That's often the problem. All right, let's look at some strategies, some ways of how we can bring that knowledge forward. Well, we're not alone, luckily, because, for example, the World Health Organization, they say now that everybody should have a green space, a public green space within 300 meters. That could be 0.5 to 1 hectare, but it's really crucial, and they put it in these guidelines too. And of course, that inspired me too for my 330-300 rule that I will talk about in a second. We see all kinds of initiatives. We see, for example, the European Nature Restoration Law that for the first time will set a canopy target, tree canopy target for all municipalities in the EU. 10% canopy they talk about, which I think for most Slovenian cities is doable. But they also require every municipality to measure, to monitor tree canopy over time. Every 6 years, you have to make a new measurement. And you have to have a positive trend, so you cannot lose tree canopy, you have to have an increase. And similarly, they talk about 45% open space. So I heard Slovenia already 40%, that's actually a really nice match already, right? So this is coming through now in terms of the politics. So this is going to change how we work in municipalities. And then of course, until very recently, I could also talk very hopefully about the United States. My partner, my spouse, is American. He went back last week to vote in Georgia. It has not helped, unfortunately. But the Biden administration managed to invest $1.5 billion in new trees, in greening neighborhoods, especially for vulnerable populations. People who have lower income, African-American, Latino communities, etc. And it has really made a huge impact on urban forestry in the US. So let's see what happens now under the returning President Trump. The first signs are not very positive, unfortunately. So cities are, of course, also developing master plans, strategies to implement all this good thinking about the importance of trees and green spaces. I've done some work in Birmingham, in Vancouver, the city of Groningen in the Netherlands, trying to set some long-term vision and targets for how to green your city. That's really needed. How do you see Ljubljana, Celje, Maribor, Kranj? How do you see them 30, 40 years in the future in terms of how green they are? What their tree cover is. Can you set some targets? Can you work towards them step by step? It doesn't all have to happen tomorrow, but you need to have a vision or a strategy. And then you have to work with some principles. So in the work I did for the Nordic Council of Ministers, the principles we work with is proximity. So everybody should have trees and green nearby, also visibility. Connectivity. So you need to make sure that greens, of course, are connected well across the city. Biodiversity, as well as diversity of people and experiences. And finally, the idea of equity, which means distributing the green fairly over the city so everybody has access to green and nature. But we did some work for the Flemish government in Belgium. They asked us, okay, Cecil and colleagues, you know so much now about the health benefits of green. Can you put this all into some guidelines? Like what could municipalities do to promote the health benefits of green? And we did a big review and gave some guidelines at different levels. But we basically came to 4 key interventions where you can make the biggest benefits. The first is to increase canopy cover. So make sure that even 1 or 2% canopy cover will really increase health benefits. The second is small parks, pocket parks. Bring them into every neighborhood because they're important for meeting places, for restoration, for children's play. Then community gardens. where people can meet each other, garden, grow food together. It's also really good for social interactions. And then the fourth that's not shown here, greening school grounds. Make sure that children can go to school in green environments. And actually green environments are not just open during the school day, but are also open later in the weekends, etc. Unfortunately, the trend, I'm not sure how it is in Slovenia, but the trend in many European countries is that schoolyards are getting less and less green because of risk, because of unclear maintenance responsibilities, because of funding cuts. But studies show, there's a really interesting study from Barcelona, that children who grow up or go to school in green environments perform much, much better on problem solving, on school tasks, than children of similar backgrounds who go to schools that are not green. Some studies suggest up to 50% difference in problem solving capacity. So this is really, for me, a very hard thing to understand, that we're sending our children to schools that are gray, green, or gray and boring, black, but not green. And then of course we need to have some good indicators, right? We need to monitor and measure how we're doing. So for example, in the United Kingdom, in England, they made this thing called the biodiversity net gain, which is basically a point system that says if you do a development, a new housing project, you have to have a higher biodiversity after the project than before. So a net gain. And that, of course, puts quite some pressure on developers and architects to think, okay, what are we going to do, right? If we can save some of the bigger trees, we're going to get a lot of points. We have to think about green roofs, we have to think about rain gardens, we have to think about habitat for animals. So far, actually, you don't have to compensate all the biodiversity on the site, right? So you can actually do it somewhere else. But it's still an interesting approach, I think, like the Malmö Green Space Factor, which is also a detailed scoring system for biodiversity. Well, then there have been recent reports trying to find good metrics for greening, for making those nature-positive, nature-based cities. This is again a report from the UK, and they say we should really look at exposure metrics, so the passive green around us that we don't have to really look for, it's around us, right? The trees around us, the canopy around us, and then the active green, the parks, the woodlands that we want to go for recreation. We need to combine those two ideally into some kind of hybrid metrics. So that then led me in February 2021, during the COVID pandemic, to come up with the 3-30-300 rule, because it actually combines exposure and access. Just in brief, and we already heard it, what it means, right? But it combines visual green through 3 large trees to be visible for everybody, from where you live, where you go to school, where you work, but also where you are cared for, a care home, a hospital. At least 30% tree canopy cover in every neighborhood, so not just as a city average. And then finally, no more than 300 meters to a nearby high-quality public green space. A park, a forest, could also be some other type of green. So together, of course, 3-30-300, they create kind of a guideline, almost like a mantra of greening our cities. Visual green, surrounding green, recreational green. And when I launched this in February 2021, I thought, okay, let's see what the interest will be. Within a week, there were over 100,000 views on social media. I got called by IUCN in Switzerland. They said, Cecil, can we post this on our website? Because this sounds like a great idea. And now we are 3.5 years later, hundreds of cities across the world are using it, if not thousands. In the Netherlands, 80% of all municipalities in the Netherlands are now using the 3-30-300 as part of policy, climate policy, green policy, development policy. 4 out of 5. Sweden is another country that is really taking off on this. France, cities like Nantes, Marseille, Nice, they're all using 3-30-300. Even Paris now wants to use it. UK, similar. But also places in South America, in Asia, Australia, they're all using 3-30-300. And it surprised me a little bit, because why would one simple formula be so popular? But of course it answered the call. It answered the call for greening. It answered the call for metrics, for evidence, because there is some good research behind it. And I said, I even ended up in the French Cosmopolitan, being branded as the guy who can make you happy in 24 hours. I'm not sure if that works like that with trees, to be honest. But. So this is how it looks, and I know I have only a few minutes left. So these are visible trees, right? This is in Zeist in the Netherlands. Canopy cover, very important. And also high quality green spaces like here in Malmö, Sweden, where people can meet, do different things, where there's different types of vegetation. So yeah, this again got messed up a little bit, but it's about viewing green where there's good evidence that that actually is good for our mental health. It's about surrounding green for cooling and also for mental health, but also, of course, for recreational green, the physical green, the physical exercise that we get when we have parks nearby. So there's some pretty good research now to actually build this up or support this. These are just some of the studies. Some of them actually look specifically at 330, 300 and say, well, it's actually a pretty good metric. The 30 to 300 are really strong. The 3, of course, is a little bit more subjective, right? There's no study really saying, oh, it needs to be exactly 3 trees. But still, of course, if I would call it the 130, 300 rule, it would not be the same appeal as the 330, 300, right? Because there is something also about the number 3. In religion, in culture, something about 3 being a magic number. And then the good thing is for a Dutch guy like me, who cannot say TH very well, 3 and tree almost sound the same. All right, and then of course now we're playing around a little bit with some of the evidence. This is very complex, but this is the pathway model by Terry Hartig, a well-known environmental psychologist. He says, well, there are actually 4 pathways that promote health, and you can actually use trees and nature to promote health through them, right? Anything from restoring your capacity, building capacity, but also limiting the negative impacts of maybe, for example, trees for allergies and so on. And you could actually play with that, right? And look at the 330, 300 and say, how do these 3 components feed into those pathways? And there are some nice links there in terms of building your restoration, being physically active, but also picking the right trees that are maybe not so allergenic or not such a nuisance. Quickly, again, lots happening. Many cities across the world are using it. Many organizations, UN is using it. And for me, really, it opens the door, right? It opens the door to a discussion. We make maps. This is Copenhagen, for example. Here you see the 3, the 30, and the 300. And you see that Copenhagen has a lot of work to do for the 30, especially. Many European cities look like this. It would be interesting to see similar analysis for Slovenian cities. This is Tokyo. Millions of people living. Look how red this city is looking. And I speak with Japanese colleagues and they say, yeah, it's true, right? On a hot summer day, you don't really go out in Tokyo. That's why we have such nice apartments. Cool and nice apartments. So yeah, ending up. So cities like Nantes, they're really using this now, right? To say, okay, what is the current state of 330, 300? How do we look? But especially also, what are we going to do now? What are going to be the interventions? More trees, more parks, better access, communicating with local communities, making sure that everybody has green. Cities like Malmö put actually 330, 300 in their general plan, in the comprehensive plan of the city, and have a special budget item now that says 330, 300. They organize special conferences for all city departments to talk about how do we achieve 330, 300. And also even the developers in the Netherlands. This is the CEO of one of the developers called Ballas Nedam, which is one of the well-known developers in the Netherlands. He comes to conferences and talks about building 330, 300 neighborhoods now. And then I have to tell you this story quickly too. Greenpeace in Belgium, they really like 330, 300, so they did a national assessment. And then they told me, Cecil, we're going to do a special campaign, but we cannot tell you what it is because it's illegal. I said, okay, let's not tell me then. But they went out at night and put 3 tree stickers on the name signs of 25 Belgian municipalities. Some people put 4 trees. I think they didn't get the memo. Should be 3 trees, obviously. But they also made a little thing and said we should go away from a land use plan to a tree use plan. So pretty cool, right? And that, of course, it got a lot of media attention. And that week, Flemish people, they always have a word of the week. And that week, 330, 300 rule was the word of the week in Belgium. So that was pretty cool, I thought, right? Especially in a country like Belgium that's so food crazy. And so usually a lot of the words are about food or beer or so. Okay, finally, so of course you have to think about metrics and guidelines and trees and tree volume, right? The tree provides benefits to the crown volume. So in the Netherlands, we have developed a new norm that is related to the 30 in 330, 300 that states that we need to have 2.2 cubic meters of crown volume per square meter as a minimum. 2.2 cubic meters per square meter. And this is a norm that cities can work with. It's easier than 30%. So you can actually grow some larger trees and score a lot of points on crown volume. So there is a little video on this in English. You can find it online. I'm happy to share my slides as well later. And then, of course, we have to think about people, communities, placekeeping, right? How do we do this all in practice? So it's not so easy to green cities. We have to do it in the right way. And then finally, in the book, Rethinking Urban Green Spaces that I wrote early this year, I talk also about making some connections, right, between the 300 and the idea of groves, and the 30 and the idea of streetwoods, turning streets into forests. And finally, to develop a special relationship with some trees, our doorstep trees. Trees that we feel close to. In our garden, in our street, at our workplace. Trees that maybe we give a little bit more attention. Give them a little bit of encouragement because they're doing a hard job for us. Give them a little bit of water during a hot summer day. Our doorstep trees that can make our neighborhoods look like this, that can help cities look like this. Even temporary forests being brought in sometimes, mini forests, community gardens, rewilding, tree wilding, nature positive cities. And of course, then always to remember the context is really important, right? Cities have different contexts. So this is a great principle, a great guideline, but it's also really not so easy. And I realized this summer when I traveled to two very different places. I went to Atlanta, Georgia, where my wife is from, and saw a city with 50% tree canopy cover. And then I went to Amman in Jordan for a wedding. And there, the canopy cover, of course, is much lower, and conditions are very, very difficult to create green cities. So thanks so much for listening. There's also a little TEDx talk if you want to hear a little bit more in 12 minutes about the importance of trees and the 330-300 rule. And yeah, thanks again. I'm looking forward to the rest of the conference. Thank you.